Happy Sunday, everybody. Thanks for popping in to Loire study session. We've done quite a few of these, and I'm really proud of this one, to be honest with you. I'm hoping that we can keep it right around half an hour. This one seems to be, there's a lot of succinct information in a lot of the slides, but there's a lot of talking points when we talk about the Loire Valley. Of course, 620-mile long river, so we've got plenty to discuss. I appreciate you all taking the time out of your day on Sunday to take a listen. For those that are here live, it certainly helps me to have an audience. And then for those that are watching on YouTube later on, thanks for your attention as well. Share it with your friends if you like it. Use it with your staff and other people that you think are studying. With that being said, let's jump into the Loire Valley. There's a whole bunch of white grapes that grow throughout the Loire. Perhaps most important is Chenin Blanc. And here it's historically sort of slow to ripen, which means it has a higher acidity when it's in northern climates at full ripeness. And you'll see a lot of high extract. Sauvignon Blanc is fairly common. Of course, Melon de Bourgogne when we talk about Muscadet and the Nantais. Chardonnay, of course, always plays a part. You'll find Orbois as well in a couple of places. You'll find sort of a rarity in Romorantin. For those of you that like distillate, Fall Blanche or Gros Plant, as it is known here in the Loire, and then Chasselas as well. As far as reds are concerned, really Cabernet Franc, sort of the king of the grapes here, and also known as Breton locally. You'll find a lot of Pinot Noir. You'll find a lot of Gamay. You'll find a little bit of Malbec, known as Côte, Pinot d'Aunis, and then Groyot as well. I threw each time that we move through a subsection of the Loire Valley, we're going to look at the authorized style of wines that are permitted. So we start with general appellations. You'll find Cremant de Loire that produces Mousseux Blanc and Rosé, and then general appellation for all of the Loire is Rosé de Loire. Here's the map. We start with Nantais and Anjou, and we'll zoom in a little bit here as we take a look. You can see here off the coast, the city of Nantes, which is where you get the name for the Nantais, this area right here. You'll also find, in addition to the Loire River, you'll find the Sèvre and the Main River. And then as we move into Anjou, named for the city of Angers, and you'll notice here too, first, for Nantais, mostly Muscadet, right? We've got a little bit of Fifandine and Coteaux d'Ancenis as well, sort of just one little guy right here. Then as you move into Anjou, let's put it right there, you'll notice that in addition to the Loire River, where it sort of splits into another one called the Loire with no E, gee, thanks a lot, guys. You'll also have the Layon River, where you'll find Côte de Layon, and it's surrounding that a lot of sweet wine areas. Most important, perhaps, the Côte de Chaume. Also, you'll find Bonnezeau, a little sub-region within that. And then there's 7 different villages that can append within Côte de Layon, including the Chaume Premier Cru. Of course, right off the other side, you'll find Savennières in the northern portion of the Loire River right here, and then Côte de la Bonse, Anjou Village Brissac. We'll also get into a sub-region of Anjou that we commonly refer to as the Anjou Saumur, which is right here. And of course, Saumur all over, but then the Rouge-only area, Saumur Champagny, right here. Let's take a look. We start in the Nantais. And I like to make these little blocks of permitted wine styles that are allowed to let you see the ones that are outliers. And so we mentioned all the Muscadet areas, and we'll talk about their importance. But the ones that stand out to me that don't produce, that can produce all 3 styles, Blanc, Rouge, and Rosé, are the Coteaux d'Ancenis and the Fifandine. If you want Blanc only, you'll have to look at Gros Plant de Nantais, and then all of the Muscadet AOP. Really a wet maritime climate. Obviously, it sits right on the ocean. Melon de Bourgogne really arrived in the 17th century. It was a distillation product for the Dutch. So in addition to the Fall Blanche that you find in Gros Plant du Pays Nantais, Muscadet and Melon de Bourgogne were initially intended to be distillation product. There was a frost that occurred in 1709 and a moratorium on the red grapes that made this a white wine region. So the 4 appellations for Melon de Bourgogne are Muscadet, Muscadet Côte de Loire, which is further north and a little bit of a leaner style, Muscadet Côtes de Grand Lieu, which is the newest AOP, adopted in 1994, and perhaps the most important, Muscadet Sèvres et Marne, which sits right between the Sèvres and the Marne rivers. 80% of the Muscadet production is 23 communes. Nearly half are bottled as Sur Lie, which is bottled directly off of their fine lees in the spring with no fining, and has to come from one of their 3 subregions, which are Clisson, Les Poulets, and Gorges. The soils here are gneiss, silica, clay, and granite. There's also an unofficial labeling term known as Hermione d'Or, which stresses ageability and terroir, which is adopted by Guy Broussard. The subzones of Muscadet Sèvres et Marne, which were adopted in 2011, require schist soils and lees aging. If you're going to label as a subregion and not as Sèvres et Marne, it requires 18 months of lees aging, which actually eliminates the opportunity to label it as Sur Lie, because those have to be done in the spring, right? Other AOPs here are the Gros Plant du Pays Nantais. We mentioned Fall Blanche, Fif Vendine for Chenin Blanc and Cabernet Franc, and then Côte d'Anceny for Pinot Gris and Gamay. They're Pinot Gris, locally known as Malvoisie. And that's your Pays Nantais. Not as tough as you might think. Loire Valley, I find when you're studying it, if you can really compartmentalize it and pick out the things that stand out, that are different about each of these little AOP, it helps to clarify things. As we look at Anjou, and of course that subregion of Saumur, I wanted to point out a few things. The 3 rouge-only areas, Anjou Village Brissac, and Saumur Champagny, and then the only rosé-only areas of Cabernet d'Anjou and Rosé d'Anjou. So that's a pretty common question that you'll find floating around in sommelier communities. Name 3 rosé-only AOP for the Loire Valley. That would be Rosé d'Anjou, Rosé de Loire, Cabernet d'Anjou. We're also going to find ourselves seeing some Mousseux wines here from Anjou and Saumur. Saumur really is the capital of sparkling wine for the Loire Valley. And then, of course, we mentioned those sweet wines, right? From Bonnezeau to Côte de Levant, Côte de Lion, Côte de Saumur, and of course, famous Court de Chaume. You've also got Blancs that can go from dry all the way to sweet, and you'll find those throughout Savennières, that little area that we noticed where you'll see some botrytis in between those 2 rivers, right? So in Anjou, locally, Chenin Blanc is commonly referred to as Pinot de la Loire. 45% of the production here are rosé blends dominated by Groyot. A third of the plantings are Cabernet Franc. The Anjou AOP is sort of the umbrella appellation. Covers red, white, sparkling. Anjou Village, as we mentioned, is red wine only for Cabernet Sauvignon and Cabernet Franc. We spoke about Savennières being critical here. These are 100% Chenin Blanc. They're generally dry. They're on that northern bank of the Loire River. Beautiful blue schist with volcanic debris. There's 2 sub-appellations that were granted in 2011. That is Roche Amoine and Coulis des Serrants. Both are somewhat monopoles, definitely Coulis des Serrants for Nicolas Joly, and then Domaine Roche Amoine and Roche Amoine. And then you have the sweet wine AOPs that are on that southern bank of the Loire. We start by speaking about Côte du Lion, that has within it 2 subregions, Bonnezeau and Court de Chaume, both critical. You've also got 7 villages that can append, including the Chaume Primer Cru, which has a minimum of 80 grams per liter of residual sugar. At Bonnezeau, you'll find 51 grams per liter. In Court de Chaume, you'll find 85 grams per liter. As a whole, if you're labeling just as Côte de Lion or Côte de Levant, their minimum RS is 34 grams per liter. So if you could sort of remember those stepping stones, you start with general appellation labeled at 34 grams per liter of residual sugar. As you get to the sub-region of Bonnezeau, you move to 51. The Premier Cru of Chaume is 80, and the Grand Cru, if you will, of Court de Chaume is 85 grams per liter. And you can label it as Grand Cru since 2010 in Court de Chaume. You'll find sandstone and schist hillsides on the banks of that Lyon River. It's a small little 45-hectare. Great producers, Domaine de Beaumard and Chateau Pierre Bis. And then it's important to note too, I think, that trees harvesting is mandatory for all. When we talk about these areas too, it's not just botrytis. You'll find quite a bit of the sweet wines are produced via passerillage, or drying of the grapes, if you will. Anjou Village Brissac, we mentioned earlier, covers the same commune as Côte de Lebance, but this is for their Cabernet Sauvignon and Cabernet Franc wines. I'm going to keep doing that today. The Saumur subregion of Anjou is technically, as we mentioned, an eastern subregion. You can label it as Anjou, but you can't do vice versa, right? We mentioned that it's the sparkling wine haven. Saumur covers red, white, sparkling, rosé, and as of 2016, the Blanc is 100% Chenin Blanc. You may also find sometimes labeled as Puy Notre Dame. These are Cabernet Franc plus maximum 15% Cabernet Sauvignon. They have a higher ABV and must weight as well. Saumur Rouge allows for Franc, Sauvignon, and Pinot d'Ani. You'll find tuffo limestone soils throughout. And then you've got the sub-region within Saumur called Saumur Champagny, which is known as the Field of Fire, is what it translate as. It's got a harder limestone, very iron-rich with shale. There's 8 communes that can produce wine under this label. To the southeast of that, you'll find Haute-Poitou, which achieved AOP in 2011 with the elimination of VDQS. Here you produce Sauvignon Blanc and Gris and Cabernet Franc for whites, reds, and rosés. Great producers of the area, of course, in Saumur Champagny, you should know Clos Rougeard. And for Saumur and all styles of wine, you should know Guy Berthaud. Next, we move to the Touraine. So not so hard, right? As long as we can compartmentalize the Pays-Nantais, we can understand why it has the Muscadet regions and its 2 little outlier red wine producing areas. We can take a look at Angers and say this is where Anjou is and why Sauvignon does well in these sweet wine areas. We could take a look at Saumur and break it down into just a handful of things that we need to know. And then we move further inland to the Touraine. And we mentioned before, you'll find sort of the split in river. And of course, there's the Loire River that doesn't have an E. Again, thanks a lot, guys. But here in the Touraine, you'll also see these other rivers. And you'll find the Vienne, the Indre, and the Cher, in addition to the Loire River that cuts through here. Major cities include Tours. That's probably the most important that you'll find here. These other ones you'll find can append to their names as we get to different parts of the just Touraine AOP. But important to note here, Chinon on the southern portion of the Loire River and Vienne River that cuts through it. You'll want to note too, on the northern banks of the Loire are Bourgail and Saint Nicolas de Bourgail. You'll get deeper in, you'll find Vouvray on the northern portion of the Loire here as you get past Tours, and then just below it is Montlouis-sur-Loire, 2 very similar growing regions here. And then as you get out further east, you run into Chevernay and Cour-Chevernay. Let's not forget either that on the northern portion, you have the Côte de Loire and the Côte de Venimois, plus you've got this small little subregion within the Côte de Loire known as Jasnier, which is also a Chenin Blanc area. Pretty cool. So let's take a look at those permitted wine styles for the Touraine area. And I think it's important for those of you that are deductive tasting at the advanced or master sommelier level, whenever you are calling Chenin Blanc, which I feel like every sommelier wants to call every wine Chenin Blanc during deductive tasting. If you're going to call Sauvignon, make sure that you note that it's from Anjou. If you're going to call Vouvray, make sure that you note it's from the Touraine. That's just my side note for the day. For Blanc-only wines, you'll find Cour-Chevernay and Jasnier. For Rouge and Rosé only, you'll find Bourgail and Saint Nicolas de Bourgail. Everything else basically does everything that they want. And Valençay also makes really delicious goat cheese. Keep that in mind. You'll also run into, of course, Blanc all the way from dry through sweet wines and Pétillant, Mousseux with Vouvray and Montlouis-sur-Loire, which are interesting to note. And then I guess I forgot to point out Touraine Noble Jus here is rosé. I'll get that highlighted on this set. So the major subregions of the Touraine, how do we separate them? Well, I break them down into Cabernet Franc-based AOPs and then Chenin Blanc-based AOPs. Your Cabernet Franc-based ones, really three important ones. Chinon, which sits on Vins de Tuf, right? More tuffeau, clay, and Varenne are the major soils. They produce red, white, and rosé. You'll find sandy, alluvial soil closest to the river Vienne, which we mentioned is a Loire tributary, where the tuffeau is more common on the slopes. Bourgueil for red and rosé, along with Saint Nicolas de Bourgueil. The difference between the two, Bourgueil really more sandy and limestone. Great producer there, Catherine and Pierre Breton. For Saint Nicolas de Bourgueil, you'll find a lighter alluvial style of soil. We mentioned other great producers beyond Catherine and Pierre Breton. In Chinon, you'll find Joguet, Dutiel, and Olga Raffaut, of course. And then you get your Chenin Blanc-based AOPs. Yes, you can make Chenin Blanc in Chinon. Of course, it does make white wines. But more of the Chenin Blanc-based ones, Vouvray, Montlouis-Saint-Loire, and Jasnier, we mentioned before. So Vouvray sits on the north bank of the Loire. It does allow for that one little 5% of Bourbois, but really rarely encountered. We mentioned the variable sweetness levels. On the south bank, Montlouis-sur-Loire, formerly a part of Vouvray, and then up in the Côte de Loire, you'll find Jasnier. Similar to Vouvray, perhaps a bit more herbaceous. Other areas of the Touraine that aren't Chenin Blanc and aren't Cabernet Franc. Hold on, we have a question. Let's take a look here. I'll pull that up at the end of the show, if you don't mind. Touraine AOP has recently been changed to 80-20 Sauvignon Blanc and Gris. Reds and rosés may include Gamay, Groyot, Pinot d'Agny, and Cabernet Franc. Gamay may also be sold as Premier style. 5 villages that may append, and we mentioned that earlier. You saw them on the map: Meslin, Azé de la Redoux, Amboise, Oily, and Chenonceau. Historical Vin Gris style of rosé from Gris Meunier. Malvoisie, Pinot Gris, and Pinot Noir is that Touraine Noble Jus, which we pointed out. Côte de Loire for red and rosé based on Pinot d'Agny, and whites from Chenin Blanc. There's that Jasnier sub-appellation that we mentioned. The Côte de Vendomois in that northern area, red, white, rosé, but really specializing in Pinot d'Agny. Chevrolet for Pinot Noir and Gamay, a little bit of Sauvignon Blanc. And then that standout, the Cours Chevrolet for Romorantin. And Valenfay, in addition to goat's milk cheeses, Sauvignon Blanc and reds and rosés from Pinot Noir, Gamay, and Côte. Let's break out of this real quick, see if we can pull up the chat. For some reason, chat's not pulling up for me. Let's see if I can do it under Manage Participants. We'll leave it. Sorry, gang. All right. As we move forward, we get to the central vineyards. We've covered basically all of the Loire Valley now as we get here. Interestingly enough, you can see where the share sort of still splits off in the Indre from the Touraine. 2 that sit on the share here are Concy and Rouy. Concy, famously the second AOP in all of France to be delimited after Châteauneuf-du-Pape. And then more importantly, though, everything that sits on the Loire River here, you'll find Orleans, and then Orleans Clary, which is a red wine only, Cabernet Franc driven. The major cities here, Sancerre, Pouilly-sur-Loire, and Gien. You'll find, of course, critical, Sancerre, and Pouilly-sur-Loire / Pouilly-Fumé, Côte de Genois, and Menetou-Salon. And the permitted wine styles here, for Blanc only, your Pouilly-Fumé and Pouilly-sur-Loire and Concy areas are only Blanc. Your Orleans Clary only does Rouge. And that's a question that kind of pops up every once in a while. Give us a Rouge only producing AOP of the central vineyards. So that one stands out for sure. The rest can do all, right? So in the central vineyards, it's a continental climate. We started with a wet maritime climate in the Nantais, and we get all the way out here to now we're in a continental climate where frost is a serious issue during harvest and during bud break, so your short seasons can really affect ripening. There's a bunch of Sauvignon Blanc in this area. Sancerre, of course, critical. On the western bank of the Loire, it also produces reds and rosés from Pinot Noir. Your three main soils here are Silex, Cayote, and Terre Blanche. The Silex is really flint-driven. Cayote are very stony with fossils in them. Terre Blanche is that Kimmeridgian limestone soil that we see in other parts of France, most important perhaps in Chablis. Pouilly-Fumé sits on the eastern bank of the Loire. It's a continuation of that Silex, providing more of a gunflint character to the wines. Rouy does Sauvignon Blanc plus Pinot Noir and Vin Gris of Pinot Grigio, Pinot Gris. We mentioned Concy for Sauvignon Blanc as the second demarcated AOP. Côte du Genois is Sauvignon Blanc plus reds and rosés from Pinot Noir and Gamay. And Minuteau Salon is Sauvignon Blanc plus Pinot Noir. Really, some of the best bottlings in the area for Sauvignon Blanc and Pouilly-Fumé in particular are Didier Dagenau. His Silex is sort of a top bottling. He also has one called Asteroid. The Silex is oak age, is more akin to white Bordeaux. Here's a picture of it, in case anybody is interested. The Pouilly-sur-Loire, known for whites from Chasselas. Orleans AOP was promoted from VEQS in 2006, where you can do reds, whites, and rosés from Meunier, Chardonnay, and then of course that Orleans Clary area for Cabernet Franc only. Pretty quick today. There's a few other AOPs of Central France there that you probably need to know. They're mostly Gamay driven. The Côte de Forez, the Côte Rouennaise, Chateau Meliant for both reds and rosés. And then you'll see Côte d'Auvergne for Gamay plus Pinot Noir and Chard, and then Saint-Pourçan for Gamay plus Pinot Noir and Chard as well. That's my show, gang. Let's see if I can pull up the chat now. Okay. Does Vindeteuf just refer to the soil? Yes, it is a soil reference. Next time you're welcome to ask it out loud, but I have you all on mute for a reason. And unfortunately, given some of the Zoom shortfalls recently, I've decided to lock down a lot of what people can share on our presentations. What kind of Gamay is used in Rouennaise? It's a different clone, right? I think you are correct that there is a different clone of Gamay utilized in Loire Valley. I'd have to double check on that, to be honest with you. Awesome. I appreciate everybody popping in. We're going to end the recording. I'll throw this up on YouTube for you all, and enjoy the rest of your week. We'll see you guys next week. I might have a new format for how to join next week. We'll see. Cheers.